Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. And again, hello and welcome to our webinar. My name is Kathy Sheffers, and I'm on the marketing team at Goodheart-Willcox. I am joined by my colleague, Rhonda Dearborn, who is our acquisitions editor for our ECE product line, and Heather Preston, who served as editor of Pradnya's book. We are all so excited to have so many ECE instructors with us today. Some quick housekeeping items for you. You are in listen-only mode, but we definitely want to hear from you. Please use the Q&A tab for asking any questions to either myself, Rhonda, Heather, and of course, Pradnya, and use the chat throughout the webinar to provide feedback and share any of your own experiences with us. Rhonda and Heather will be monitoring the chat box and the Q&A, and we will have some time at the end of the webinar for kind of an official Q&A session. And then wanted to let you know also that this webinar is being recorded and you will receive the recording in the next day or so. So you don't have to take notes, just sit back and enjoy. And thank you again for being with us today. So we are in for a great session today, and I'm so happy to share a little background information about Pradnya. She is passionate about preparing early care and educational professionals to work with young children and their families, and she believes that experiential learning empowers pre-service teachers. Pradnya leads the Early Childhood Development Program at Bright Point Community College in Virginia. She brings over 25 years of experience in the field of early childhood education as a teacher educator, a professional development facilitator, and a child care director. She has received the Mortarboard Top 10 Professors Award, the Dean's Award for Collaboration, and earned a place in Who's Who among America's teachers. So Pradnya, I will turn it over to you for a wonderful session.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much. I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to a number of people. I want to start with GW Publisher, who made my dream turn into a reality. I'm really, really grateful for this team. Thank you so much for the care and respect that you provided in allowing me to express my voice. A special thank you to Heather Preston, my editor for my project, and I am just so grateful for those thoughtful questions, provocative questions, just help with image searches, so many different things. But as part of this process, I think we developed a friendship as we connected, and for that I will be eternally grateful. Thank you, Heather. Dr. Sandra Duncan, she introduced me to GW, and she gave me that nudge to write a textbook or think about writing a textbook. And I am so honored that she co-authored chapter 6 of this book with me. And what a wonderful opportunity I had for her expertise and love of nature and environments to trickle into this book. Thank you very much, Sandra, if you're in the audience. My book, I don't think would have been what it is if a number of contributors hadn't either written features or given me their time to do interviews with me for this book. I will be talking about those features later in the presentation, but I think it provides such a wonderful opportunity for students to really think about the real life things that are happening there and the thoughts and the views of all of these people who make my book what it is. The chapter reviewers all through the process, thank you for your thoughtful questions, and know that it really did play a significant role in shaping this book and what it is today. My own nests, my family, my friends, my professional community, not just during the time of writing this book, but the way in which that they have shaped my worldview certainly comes into this book, and I am very grateful for those relationships and interactions. And of course, all of you here today who are attending, thank you for giving me your time, and I am very excited to share a little more about my book as we go along. If you've looked through and browsed through, you kind of know that the theme is that, or the analogy that I'm using throughout this book is that of a nest. So where did this inspiration come from? My son Mateo, when he was about 6 or 7, a little baby bird ended up on our windowsill, and it couldn't fly. It must have fallen from a nest in a tree. And Mateo was very concerned. He was very concerned about this bird, and he started firing questions to Siri about what to do, because I said, just wait, just wait. I think mommy bird will come. And he started, addressing Siri with all those questions, and he kept getting responses that said, wait. And his question was, what if she cannot come? What if she cannot come? Not what if she doesn't come, but what if she cannot come? And it was a long time that the process was just really pretty amazing. The mother came, we saw her flutter her wings, the baby bird would move a little bit. And then it was just really amazing. I couldn't capture it on camera. It was so quick. Both of them flew up. Mommy bird right behind this baby bird up into the tree. And two things started to make me think. One, of course, was the coaching and support, and the mother was showing the bird what to do and how to flap the wings and fly. But the second question was Mateo's question, what if she cannot come? And his relentless pursuit in trying to find answers. And he kept saying, but there has to be something that we can do, something that we can do, because what if mommy bird cannot come? And so the idea of thinking about much more than the family, and whose responsibility is it to take care of children? And my mind started to gravitate to that. Mateo has always been the inspiration for me to think out of the box and think in different ways. This one translated into a book. So as we move on to the next slide, I want to just talk about a couple of topics and approaches that are embedded throughout this book. And one of the main things that you will, of course, the main theme, as you will see on the next slide, is that children are the shared responsibility of their family, school, and community. If you've taught this class before, this type of a class before, I don't know if your experience is the same as mine, but I find that students understand the family and school, but not so much the community. And they don't quite get that full connection. And so that is definitely the theme. How do these three layers serve or share the responsibility of raising children? So throughout the book, there are three approaches that you will see. The first one is a reflective approach, and that is where the self-awareness builds. I strongly believe that in order to have effective interactions with others, you really have to know yourself. And so there are numerous opportunities throughout this book. I'll talk in a little bit about features as well. But this reflection is embedded in many, many different ways throughout the book. And when you reflect in that way, I think it leads to a strength-based approach. And that's where the self-awareness becomes self-efficacy. So although there's a whole chapter in the very last unit about self-efficacy and what teachers and educators would need in order to function and do their role well, this idea of a strengths-based approach also comes from things that I hear students say often. Well, it's just not going to work, because if the family is not going to do that, there's nothing else we can do. But they're wanting to really reflect on what's going on, and then thinking about, okay, where do the strengths lie in me, and where do the strengths lie in the family? That becomes that intersecting circle where those effective interactions start to blossom. So there is a heavy emphasis on a strengths-based approach. Let's find those strengths as we think also about ourselves. And then all of that begins to lead to an inclusive approach that becomes a part of us. So thinking about something like bias, unless I know about my own biases, I'm not going to be able to see the strengths when I interact with somebody else. And unless I put all of that together, I'm not going to be able to make that inclusive approach a part of me. And it's that inclusive approach that then nurtures and empowers all children, not just a certain part of the population. So if you look at the book in terms of how it is organized, there are 5 units in the book, and you will see the nest analogy throughout. Um, we start with just thinking about the layers of a nest, and then what are those first nests that build trust and resiliency? And then what does it mean to nest in collaborative partnerships? And then we switch to thinking about vulnerabilities in nesting and what does it mean to survive in systems of inequity. And then finally, what do we do with those nests that need protection and they need restoring? So I would like to go through the different chapters and kind of orient you. I want to talk about the nest analogies that have been used throughout, and also tie in this concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it is a theme that goes throughout the book. And I pulled out some examples. There are many more, of course, in the book, but I've pulled out some examples to showcase. And starting with this first unit, thinking about living, learning, and growing in a layered nest. You know, when we think about a nest, I'm sure that the first image that comes to your mind when you say nest is that first one over there in chapter 1, right? This cup-shaped nest. And this cup-shaped nest has 3 layers. The birds start with a loose set of twigs, and then they have to have some kind of a mold so because there's a little more of a structure that starts to come in as they mix those twigs with mud. And then inside, they will insulate this egg with something soft, something cushiony for those eggs. And if you think about family, school, and community in that way, the family is that insulation. The school becomes that middle layer between the family and the community. And that is another theme that's there throughout. The school is a liaison between the family and community. So what is that responsibility that we have as early care and education professionals? But here's where Bronfenbrenner's theory launches the discussion, the ecological model launches the discussion about how we understand so many different factors, and that analogy of this cup-shaped nest, looking at the 3 layers of the human nest. Chapter 2 then goes into nesting, or the socialization practices that we see. And what does it mean to be socialized by a number of different social agencies, and agents, not just the family. And then chapter 3 looks at diversity in families, and it uses a bowerbird. The bowerbird is an amazing bird. It creates illusions. It creates illusions for the female and builds this twig and makes the female feel like the bird is a lot larger than it actually is, because there's this narrow set of twigs and then an open courtyard. And so everything begins to look larger. They also arrange little items in an ascending order so that it looks big. And that concept of illusion is used in this chapter. But the 3 chapters lay the foundation for the book, and then it goes deeper and deeper into each of these. So in the next slide, I have an example of an optical illusion. Chapter 3 is full of optical illusions. You think about diversity and equity. How do we move beyond this point of thinking of diversity as commodity? You know, we often say things like, okay, we have so many people of color, and we kind of give it a number, okay? But I'm going to use this example over here. I don't know how clearly you can see it on the screen, but if you look at the first picture on the left-hand side, you have 2 arrows there, and the shade of those 2 squares looks different. It looks like it's a different shade, and it's because of the shadow that's falling from that cylinder. But when you draw a line from one square to another, you actually see that they are the same shade. And this is one of the optical illusions that is used then to help students think about how did you, well, have you ever been in a position where you may have overlooked the similarities just because there was such a stark difference? And have you ever tried drawing a point of connection between you and the other person to be able to see the similarities rather than the differences? So this is just one example of an illusion. This chapter has several others which looks at concepts like intersectionality and how to think about diversity as a lived experience. And it draws from that analogy of the bowerbird and how the bowerbird creates illusions for the female bird so that the female bird will choose its mate based on the nest that is built. So there in that foundation is one way in which diversity, equity, and inclusion is laid out. Also with the ecological model, you think about so many different influences that come about. There's bound to be differences in how information is processed, how we relate to different things around us. Then moving on to the next 3 set of chapters in Unit 2, we start to go deeper into those first nests. Now that chapter 2 goes a little deeper into looking at socialization and all of these 3 areas. And for this unit, I have chosen social insects. Social insects teach us a lot about resiliency. And chapter 4 begins with those foundations of resiliency and what happens when we nest at home in the family. And if you think about those mounds that we see, the termite nests, of course, they are pests for us, but it is pretty amazing how quickly they can rebuild their nest, even if it is destroyed. And what happens there? Those mounds are not the real nest. The nest is way deep down. And they're constantly adjusting those mounds along with the weather and all of that so that they keep their nests safe. And the idea that families have to do that. They have to take care of a lot of things to keep their nests safe, whether it's insurance, whether it's other policies, work. And the idea, again, that not all families can do that. Chapter 5 looks at ants, and you think about ants and the way in which they interact and create these large structures. If you've watched ants at a surface, they will come and then they will move away, kind of like a battery operated toy. And in the process, they create these large networks and then eventually fall in line. And teachers do that with families too, because they have to know when they can go and when they should back out. And then eventually, how does order come about? But also ants are responsible for helping plants grow away from the parent plant because they carry those seeds to a different place. And then finally, we talk about nesting in neighborhoods and bees. And bees are just a wonderful source of information for us in the way in which they live in a community. The idea of emergence is brought in over here, the biological concept of emergence, where things happen, things that happen at an individual level are very different when a group comes together and that same action turns into something so complex. And how does that happen in a neighborhood? And whether it is learning what those boundaries are, learning how to develop that sense of place, how to develop that sense of trust and a sense of order. What is the role of those neighborhoods? And we distinguish here between neighborhoods and sense of community, the physical space in which we live, but then how do those spaces help us develop a sense of community? In this unit then, as we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, we dig a little deeper into Bronfenbrenner's model. Beyond the ecological model, this is what it evolved into as Bronfenbrenner worked on the theory. And it gives students a deeper perspective to think about, yes, we may have similar ecological situations, and yet there is a difference in how one person ends up versus how another ends up and the results of that. And later on in his theory, Bronfenbrenner addressed this PPCT model, the process, the person, the context, and the time. The context is really that ecological part, but it makes a difference. It makes a difference in terms of when that influence happened. What were the personal characteristics of the person? And then what was the process that they were used with, or the interactions, what you would call the proximal processes that get more and more complex as the interaction continues over a period of time. And so this gives an opportunity for students to really think about, okay, how do we look at it in a deeper way and not just look at the outside environment, but there's much more to it. And so a deeper appreciation of complexity is required when we work with families. And then when we move on to Unit 3, now we're looking at coral reefs as a nest. 2 chapters in this unit that look at homeschool partnerships and then school community partnerships. The first chapter focuses more on the type of support that we are looking at. The polyps and the coral, they have a relationship. They can't live without each other. When those polyps die, they add to the skeleton and create that strong structure. So as we make our contributions and build these partnerships, we also build really strong structures for children. So in the first one, we look at the types of support. As educators and educators, we're so used to jumping from a place of strength and giving advice, like the fringe reef, which juts out from the shore from a position of strength. And yet that is not what the family might need. So that is a barrier reef support too. Maybe the family is just asking us to run along with them and let the children be in that little lagoon that is formed. And then we'll get to chapter 8. We really look at the types of relationships that we want to build. And if you're in such a large community, then yes, to survive and thrive, you have to have smaller clusters of relationships that are dependent on each other. In this unit, then, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we really think about that emphasis on how we move from an I to a we. And that language, just the simple way in which we approach things. So from invite to welcome, from inform to weigh in, from involve to weave in. And if you look at that last value there, of course, there's definitely participation trumps attendance. We want to go beyond that and not just say we marked off, okay, we've done a family night, 80% attended. But really understanding that all forms of participation are equally worthwhile. And why do we make families feel like just volunteering in classrooms is the best way to be involved? What are these other forms? What about the mother who is working 2 shifts and is really working hard to stay up in the night, wash that same shirt, iron that shirt for the child, and get the child to school? What are the different forms of participation? It says here that Joyce Epstein's overlapping spheres of influence is really, really helpful in understanding how these things come together for the children. Moving on to Unit 4, and as we start to look at systems of inequity, the analogy shifts a little bit from an actual nest to fables. And the fable of the giraffe and the elephant, a giraffe's house, no matter how many modifications you make, is not going to work for an elephant. So it begins with that fable and the idea or thinking about how do we bring voices together, because we have to redesign a new structure if we want a system of equity. And the saguaro cactus, the desert beauty, with its arms raised in perpetual openness to the world, the legend of the Native American tribe is that it was a woman who sunk to the ground and then grew up with this, emerged with this openness. And that chapter looks at promoting social justice in early care and education. And what does it mean to be open-minded to that? And what does it mean to have this forest of saguaro cacti? A reference is also made to the children's book Cactus Hotel, where so many different species can live under this one saguaro cactus. And in this unit, the emphasis also shifts to now looking at adverse community environments. So in Unit 2, when we talk about resilience, we talk a lot about adverse childhood experiences. And true, yes, they do experience that, but we need to pay attention to the adverse community environments, because this is again where the strengths-based approach comes in. We're trying to fix something on the tree, when the soil is already contaminated, right? And so how do we look at the adverse community environments that are creating those adverse childhood experiences for children? So diversity, equity, and inclusion is brought in that way. And then finally, we have in unit 5, where we get to protecting and restoring nests. We're looking at the human nest with the 3 layers, the family, school, and community, and what do early care and education professionals need in order to become those efficacious people and agents of social change that that work for young children. And in this unit, the diversity, equity, and inclusion is about really helping students to understand, yes, there are large movements. Of course, you can participate in that. But being an agent of social change is also something that can happen at a very, very small level. And so these chapters kind of allow for students to be able to feel empowered to make that change in their way. And if you look at each introduction, you will see that as when the chapter starts, you will see that there is a picture of children, child-oriented picture, early childhood, and then in the corner is the nest. And so I'm really very, very grateful to the GW design team to have captured my thoughts through their design. And it just gives an introduction. It also identifies the NAEYC standards and the DAP principles. I'd like to talk a little bit about the book features, because I think it's the book features that help students connect. If you are an instructor like me, you probably know that that's what they gravitate to. And not just gravitate to, I think they learn a lot from those stories. And so I was fortunate to have 29 different voices that contributed to the different features. And on the next slide, you'd see such a wide variety. There were parents, there were children, there were community organizers, teacher educators, early childhood practitioners, and even my own students who contributed their views. The voices were many, many, many voices, but the commitment was one, and that was to nurture and empower all children. So I've tried to pick out some features from different units so that you kind of get a holistic idea. But one of the big ones is mindset. Without a mindset that helps you to stick with certain practice, nothing's really going to change. And so every unit starts with a mindset. You can see all 5 units have that, and then it ends with asking students to go back and think about that mindset that they have expressed through the questionnaire. You'll see this symbol of the brain at the end after the chapter summary in the last chapter of that unit. And on the next slide, there's an example of what it looks like. So this one is from chapter 1. Typically, it starts with a scenario. In this case, it is Billy, who has been rejected from one school, suspended from there, and the parents are seeking childcare for him, and the observations that happen. And then usually there's like 10 statements. I've just clipped out 6 here. But there'll be a statement like, children like Billy take too much time from the teacher. It's not fair to the other children. And you'd have 4 options for that. Doing that at the beginning of the unit, and then returning to it at the end of the unit to really see if anything changed and what exactly triggered that change. The idea is not to come to a consensus, but more to encourage that reflection, because that reflective approach is what begins to get you to think in a way that impacts your practice. Moving on to the next feature. This feature is called What's Your Personal Theory of Practice? And you'd see the icon of a tree for this one. Every person, before they hear about Vygotsky and Piaget, they start with a personal theory. And it's rooted in that personal theory, everything that you do. And so that personal theory of practice is very important, I believe, to tap into. And so in this feature, they are asked to think about that personal theory. Then they're introduced to another theory. And then part 2 is, okay, now what will you use from this expert theory to enrich your own personal theory? So I'd like to just give you a snapshot of what theories are used in this class or in this book, sorry. Definitely Bronfenbrenner launches the discussion, but there is a tendency in books to have a chapter of theories and then forget about it. So in each of the chapters, you will see that theory is weaved in. Different theorists come in at different points. Erik Erikson in the psychosocial theory, looking at that bidirectional influence. Vygotsky in chapter 3, thinking about how do we socially construct everything, and therefore diversity comes about, or differing views come about. We have Bowlby and Ainsworth work on attachment theory. That comes in chapter 4. In chapter 5, we see Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. Chapter 6, we bring in Dr. Sandra Duncan's honeycomb hypothesis. This is the chapter that she co-authored with me, and this is the one where we use the bee's nest. So the honeycomb hypothesis, how children make sense of it. Chapter 7 and 8 bring in Joyce Epstein's overlapping spheres of influence. And then moving on, we go to Paulo Freire, pedagogy of the oppressed, as we look at systems of inequity. What is that culture of silence that is created? Moving on to Mahatma Gandhi's principles of education, Nae Talim, and what that has to do with social justice, the social sin of work without wealth. Wealth without work, and Bandura's self-efficacy theory in the very last chapter for the students. So it's all weaved in, and these personal theorists thinking about personal theory and then taking in an expert theory and thinking about how it enriches our practice is another feature. An example of that feature is on the next slide, and you will see that there's part 1 is what's your personal theory of practice? Those same questions are then translated into part 2 with the question, what aha moments or takeaways enrich your perceptions and beliefs about the importance of intentionally building partnerships with families? This one comes from chapter 7. So there are different ones in different chapters. The next feature that we have is windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. This is a large number of different experiences shared by people, some of my experiences, and a combination of all of those put together. But the purpose of this is to provide readers with a story that either helps them to hold up a mirror to themselves, like can you identify with something in the story, or does it shed light on somebody else's story? Does it provide a window into somebody else's life? And sliding glass doors, how do you feel about transporting yourself into somebody else's world? I think that's a really crucial thing that we need if we're going to interact with diverse families. An example of that feature is from Dr. Keely Klein, for whose family books are very, very important. And this one is couched in the proximal processes. And she talks in this about how important it is for her to connect through those books with her children. And you can see at the end, the part that I've clipped is at the end. Students are asked these questions. Does this reflection hold up a mirror to any of your memories of family activities that you have bonded over? Does it provide a window into another family's life? As an early care and education professional who supports families, how does this reflection help you transport yourself into someone's experiences? And when my students share this in class, you get a lot of different responses. They'll say, well, my family bonded over cooking, or, just a wide range, movies or shopping, or whatever it is. But to really identify that and then think about, okay, can you get to know a family in this way? I'm going to point little Ellie out there on the side with the white bow in her hair, and you'll know why when I get to the end of the presentation. The next feature is nesting tips. These are tried and true ideas by early care and education professionals. Some of them are parents, because parents are first educators of children. but project leaders, other relevant practitioners who are committed to and have successfully done something. And so these nesting tips provide ideas for students to think about, okay, well, I could do this in my classroom too. The example that I pulled out for this one is from chapter 10. And this is Dr. Ashley Nardi, who is the early education, um, uh, the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the National Child Research Center in Washington, D.C. And she's also a preschool teacher, so she has this dual role. You don't hear about a DEI director in a preschool very often, but that in itself is commitment of this center to commit to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and prioritize anti-bias education. And she talks about how she works with children and how it is not just something that you do in Black History Month or, but really think about, where do we come from? Who is around us? What are these differences? And she talks about how she helps the teachers through her role to be able to identify, very intentionally identify, these themes and engage in anti-bias education, which is getting harder and harder all the time to be able to do that in our environment. And then we have trending topics, which are issues that early care and education professionals need to know about. And they come in the form of stories, they come in the form of projects that others are doing and ways to explore historical roots, cultural roots, political roots, just a wide range of different topics. And you can see that in the index there, the teacher shortage crisis, adultification, just a wide range of different things. The example that I selected for this one is the Jirani project in chapter 12. This is a project in Kenya for vulnerable children and in protecting their nests. Dr. Beth Swadner, who is here in the US, and Mark Okello, who is in Kenya, I got to interview both of them. And this is just a wonderful way in which truly the family, school, and community work together. These are children who were orphaned or for some reason cannot be cared for by their family. They invest in them for a really, really long time. These children are growing up there. You see they have now a library space, and with partnership with the ASU engineering department, just recently they got a virtual library that was created for them. But the money goes towards sending them to school and then also getting them settled in life. But the wonderful thing about this feature and what comes out of this project is, here's this family, the very first of the Jirani project children, who now has 3 of her own children, but all of the Jirani project alumni now are not needing support. They're supporting their own children. And it is such an exciting and hopeful outcome of this project. This is couched in how to become an agent of social change. And the principle that it is couched in is think long-term, think long-term. So the investment that goes in here is not just for the time being, it is really helping them to survive and thrive in their worlds. And then the last one is an invitation to act. Just ways in which college students could find their niche in making a change, in doing something that is concrete. You would see that icon there for all the invitations to act. And I chose the one from chapter 1, which is bloom where you are planted. So how do you get started? Where are you? How are things going? What will you do to take the first step? Just find the issues that are around you. And then how are you going to bloom when you are planted? So an invitation to act could translate into discussions. It could translate into actual assignments that they do in a wide range of different opportunities. And then I want to bring up Ellie's picture here. That's why I pointed her out. Well, she's in 5th grade now. She was really little then, but This is a painting that she made. It was a competition. She won first place for it. She titled it Happy, and the topic for the competition was community. And you can see that they are all puzzle pieces. This is also the main picture opener for chapter 6. And if you'll notice, that was where we used the nest of a bee. She even has a little bee on the bottom over there in that small puzzle piece. But I got a chance to interview her, and she was so gracious to let me use this picture. My journey started with a child's voice, my own child's voice, and my book ends with Ellie's words as she describes her vision of community. The chapter itself starts with this line from Jordan's poem, "We are the ones we've been waiting for." And Ellie explained to me her conceptualization of this. I want to point these pictures out here in the blank space. She said, they're not quite there yet, but eventually they will fit. They will fit. People are going to keep coming into the community, and we'll find a way to fit. And this little girl up on top there is sitting alone, but she's not alone because things will get built around her, and she will become part of the community. And those were the themes, and her whole interview is in that last chapter. Togetherness, friendships, reaching out, those are the themes. And so the book ends with Ellie's voice. Differences are accepted as part of the picture with the conviction that they will somehow fit together. Many adults and likely other children envision a world like this too. Will you be the change agent who strives to bring this vision to fulfillment? The time is now. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. And that's how Ellie inspired me. And so I wrap up the book with her voice. In addition to all of these features, there are also some wonderful features that are in every chapter. And those include images with critical thinking questions on the bottom. There are checkpoint questions after each section. This one is a chart, and charts also that help children think, and then key terms. The chart that you see there is commensalism to mutualism, and it's couched in the coral reef and looking at symbolic relationships that we have. A lot of times early care and education professionals think, okay, I've done my community bit because I invited the fire truck to come so that the preschool children could see it. And that's commensalism because only one party is really benefiting from it. It's not a true partnership, but it's a start. It's still a start. And how can we lead towards mutualism where it becomes a strong partnership as we move forward? So how do you look for things in your neighborhood? How do you bring the neighborhood into your curriculum? How do you take people out into the neighborhood? So a large number of different types of features that help students process, reflect, build that self-awareness, develop that self-efficacy, and move towards an inclusive approach that that should become a part of us, within us, as we envision the world we want our children to have. So I am going to stop at this point and hand it back to Kathy and Rhonda.
Thank you, Pradnya. What wonderful content you have created. We all need to be like Ellie. She's very inspiring at the end there. I loved that story and her themes that resonated with you and will resonate with the book. That's just beautiful. I wanted to share some information with our audience about how they could access your book, how their students are able to use the book. We have a number of formats for you, hoping to meet your students where they are. Pradnya's book is available as a printed textbook. There's also an ebook, just an online book. We also offer LMS integration if you're using Canvas or Blackboard or D2L or any other learning management system. GW content integrates very easily with all of those platforms to allow you to utilize the platform that you're used to using that way. When you do use that LMS integrated content, what's great is you're also able to have access to a number of authentic videos that align with the content in Pradnya's book. These videos were shot in actual learning environments. They're very authentic and real and depict children at play, indoors and outdoors, and collaborating with the community. And those videos are accompanied by guided worksheets. And what's nice about that is you as instructors are able to assign those videos. They make great classroom discussions and really make the videos a little bit more meaningful when you can work alongside those guided worksheets with your students. So those are the formats. And then I wanted to call your attention to a couple items. If you see at the top, we have the printed textbook, has a list or retail price of $93.28. And then if you look to the bottom, we have a bundle. And I just love the bundle because the value is just wonderful for students and instructors who want to use both maybe the printed textbook. We have a lot of students who still like a physical textbook, but would like to have access to all of those digital activities. The bundle is just $7 more than buying the textbook alone. So if you're using, again, Canvas or Moodle or D2L or Blackboard, the bundle is a really nice option for you to consider for your students. And that, again, would give them access to the printed textbook, plus the ebook and all of those videos, the guided worksheets, and some other interactive activities that are part of Pradnya's whole complete solution. And here again, just talking about those videos, they've been very well received by instructors. I'd love to hear in the chat if you use videos as you teach this course, or if you'd be interested in using videos. So far, we've heard from a lot of instructors that do, and they really appreciate the availability of those. They provide a great teaching resource. They like the fact that these videos are original. It's not something you're going to find on YouTube or anywhere else. They're original to Pradnya's book and really align with the content that she's laid out so nicely for us today. So like I said, that would be automatically on your student and on your instructor bookshelf when you utilize the digital options. And then also I wanted to make sure that you know that when you adopt Pradnya's text for your course, you have free access to a full lineup of online instructor resources to hopefully save you time and help you build out your program as efficiently and expansively as you'd like. There's lesson plans, there's answer keys, there's pacing guides, graphic organizers, PowerPoint presentations, and test banks. So a real complete solution. You'd, of course, also have access to the online book as part of your instructor resources. Your GW sales rep might have already sent you an Explore sample, which gives you access to the full ebook, plus all of those instructor resources from Chapter 3. So at the end of the webinar, we'll give you an option to request a sample as well, but know that you'll get to have kind of a sneak peek of all of those resources within the sample. And then if and when you adopted Pradnya's book for your course, you'd have all of it for all of the chapters that Pradnya outlined today. And then we just wanted to share with you, we've been so committed as a company to early childhood education. It's near and dear to our hearts. And you'll see we just have a growing list of titles for you, starting with Pradnya's book there with Family, School, and Community Partnership, and then others aligned to the different courses that you teach with emergent literacy, child development, some curriculum guides, administering and supervising programs for young children, the developing teacher, which is for a practicum course. And again, those ECE videos are available as well. So know that we're happy to share samples of any of these titles with you. And we're certainly here to help you. And I know Rhonda would be interested in knowing if you'd be interested in becoming a reviewer in forthcoming titles or talking to her about becoming an author. So there's lots of opportunities to connect with GW, and we'd love to have you as part of our community. So with that, I'm going to pause for a minute and see if we have any questions or comments, Rhonda, that have come through.
Yeah, so far there have not been any questions, but if you do have questions, anyone, please post them in the QA box. You'll see that on the screen there. It looks like someone did pose a question for the emergent literacy and early childhood education. Does that align with Science of Ready? Now, I don't know that right off the top of my head. My email is in the last slide that Kathy's going to show. So if you have specific content questions like that, please email me and I will follow up with the authors and the editor who was responsible for that book. Those authors will be doing a presentation, just a little promotion in about a week, right, Kathy? We'll be doing that. So
Yeah, October 28th.
questions like that will be served to those authors, but please, by all means, Kathy will be sharing my contact information. But because we don't have any questions specific for Pradnya at this second, I thought I would ask Heather. As Pradnya said earlier in the presentation, Heather was the editor who worked with Pradnya on this book. And I just thought I'd ask Heather to talk a little bit about how unique Pradnya's book is for this course and why it is so different and presents an opportunity for faculty to leverage what's unique about the book.
Yes, thank you, Rhonda. I could talk forever about what makes Pradnya's book special and what makes Pradnya special. The major thing I want to point out is that this is the first book of its kind on the market. There is not currently a family school community partnership book with a focus on early childhood education. The other books on the market will go all the way up, from birth through adolescence, young adulthood, and the focus in those books tends to be a little heavier on the adolescent side and what to do with adolescents who've experienced trauma, how to administer trauma-informed care to older children, how to help them. Our book specifically focuses on the young child, and that is something that is so important because we could decrease the amount of teens who need that trauma-informed care if we can catch these kind of issues. And like Pradnya said, get all three layers of those nests working together to give every child the best chance that they can have in this world. So really, I had so many people coming up to me. We were at the PLI conference in AC, people coming up to me interested in this book. It's a required course, family school and community, in most ECE programs now, most college ECE programs. So to have a book like this that's focused on ECE, this book is a unicorn. It's absolutely special. Also, like Pradnya said, I think you said 29 was the number of contributors. I mean, Pradnya worked so hard to get so many voices into this book. This book is not just Pradnya's voice. She interviewed so many people, and she didn't just put a little blurb or a little quote from these people. I mean, she filled body text, features, everything with all of these different perspectives with all these people and how they're finding ways to help their community. Like Pradnya also said, community kind of seems to be the element that's left off a lot. Teachers know how to work with parents, but when they think of community, like she said, it's like, oh, fire prevention day. And we need to, that approach has not served us. So the community piece is the element that we want to get in there more, and that's what Pradnya has done in this book. She also has a beautiful international lens in the book. She didn't just look for Americans to contribute. She reached out internationally and found voices. You saw the Jirani project in Kenya. That was probably one of my favorite features in the book. So interesting. And just like she said, not just, a charity thing where we throw some money at a problem or throw some supplies or something like that. They are helping these children throughout their lives. And I think having that international lens helps us see how things are done differently, what we can do differently. We could look at things bigger. We don't need to just look at a charitable contribution. We can look at starting some kind of program like this and really helping children for the long term. So, like I said, okay, I'll stop. Like I said, I could go on.
Thank you, Heather.
But...
Thank you, Heather. We did have a couple of comments that I think are worth sharing. Stephanie said, I've been looking for a book for 5 years, so I'm excited to review this book. Thank you for the opportunity. And then Neil Offer said, sorry, I missed the beginning of the session. Can I request a desk copy? And I said, yes, we'll be covering that on the last slide. So Kathy, take it away.
Well, what a perfect segue. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you so much to all of you for spending your valuable time with us today. This slide has some next steps and options for you to connect with GW and gain access to Pradnya's book. Your GW educational consultant is your dedicated rep. I think there's a couple on the call today with us. I think I saw Ann Downing, who happens to be in Pradnya's area. So she helps Pradnya with her program. Ann, hello to you. I think I saw your name. But your educational consultant, if you haven't connected with them yet, you can go to that website that we listed here to find out who's the consultant in your geographic area. If you know them already, reach out and they'd be happy to share more information. They can get you a sample of the book, provide pricing, quotes, whatever you need. They're a great group of people and they'd be happy to help you any way they can. You can also go right to the GW website, and it's g-w.com/preview. And then if you click down into the early childhood education tab, you'll be able to see Pradnya's book, and as well as those other books we had on the previous screen, to request a sample there. As I mentioned earlier, if this has inspired you to become an author or a reviewer for any of our forthcoming ECE titles, you can reach out to Rhonda. Also, she had mentioned if you have specific topic questions that she can get the answer for you, rdearborn@g-w.com. I know Rhonda would be very happy to help you there. Also, if you have a minute, and if you can put in the chat, let us know if you're going to be attending the NACCE conference in Anaheim in November. Rhonda and Heather and myself and our GW educational consultant, Peter Martinovich, who's in California, will all be there. We would love to meet you in person. Pradnya will be there. She's going to be doing a book signing on the first Wednesday night at 5:30 and then presenting Thursday morning. So you'll get to meet Pradnya in person. And if you're one of the first ones to come to the booth at 5:30, you'll be able to get a signed copy of her book. I'm going to put a plug in. I'm in Florida, and I'm going to be working the Florida AC conference that kicks off tomorrow. So if you're going to be there, I would love to see you. And then Mark Muzzio, who works in our Illinois territory, is going to the Go AC conference this weekend. That's for Cook County and Lake County in Illinois. And then Jason Cartledge, our representative for New Jersey, was just at the New Jersey conference last week. So lots of opportunities. As I mentioned, we're very excited about early childhood education and are looking for so many opportunities to connect with all of you. So please make sure you always stop by at the different conferences to say hello. And then I'm in marketing, so I have to tell you to connect with us on social media. So if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or X or want to follow us on YouTube, we've got lots of content that we share there about product launches, about other webinars. So lots of opportunities for all of us to connect. So Rhonda, did anyone say in the chat that they're attending NACCE? Do we have anybody
No comments about that, but yep, but it's great to be able to promote that we're going to be there. We'd love to see you in person. All of our books will be on display. We'll be looking for reviewers. We'd love to chat with you. And Pradnya will be at the booth, as Kathy said, and some of our other authors will be doing book signings and meet the author events as well. So we'll have lots of activities.
Wonderful. Well, on behalf of Rhonda and Heather and myself, we want to thank you so much for participating in this webinar today. And I'd like for Pradnya to have the final word to all of you. So Pradnya, I'll let you close us out.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm excited to see if you do adopt this book, what that means to you and how you take it and how you make it your own. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming today.